Hello, my name is Sonia. I'm the Community Engagement Officer for Parent Line at your town. Today I've got Alia, who is the cyberbullying consultant for Parent Line. I have the Parent Line manager, Kim, and I've also got the Kids Helpline at Schools program manager. We're talking today about the transition from primary school to high school and some of the challenges and the concerns that might arise from that transition. And we're going to be talking at the moment about mental health and wellbeing, which is a big space for young people going into that transition. So we're looking at overall mental health, we're looking at sometimes maybe the sleep routines of young people, dietary requirements, and some of those routines and structures that many young people can present well with and engage well with. So from your perspective as the Kids Helpline at Schools program, you speak to a lot of young people face to face. What are some of the concerns that you see in this space of mental health and wellbeing?
I guess one of the main things that we hear from young people is a fear around expressing mental health, and that mental health itself is a bit of a dirty word, and that it does have quite a negative connotation to it, like just the word, mental health as a phrase. So one of the biggest parts that we really try to promote, or one of the biggest messages, is that mental health is something that we all have. You can have, good mental health. Maybe your mental health might be suffering, but ultimately it's something that we all have, and we're all working on constantly throughout our lives, not just as teens. It's something, that we take with us and always need to be mindful of. So I guess really sort of destigmatizing that, really normalizing it, and normalizing emotions. There are times where it's okay to feel bad. It's okay where it's to feel a little bit out of control and things like that. It's just finding healthy coping strategies to be able to identify why they're feeling like that and how they can healthily progress through that, that specific emotion. So really having conversations around the word self-care, which sometimes is an introductory thing too. They might not have never heard that or heard of that before. So looking at what they can actually do to care for themselves, establishing a routine as well. And identifying emotion regulation strategies that will help, with certain situations too. So that, that's going to look a lot different if they're, spiraling a little bit in a classroom. How do they emotionally regulate in the classroom, as opposed to what are their regulation strategies like at home, where they are a bit more in a safe, comfortable environment to, express themselves a little bit more. So yeah, it's really, really great to have those conversations. We tend to get a lot of eye rolls when we talk about the importance of sleep. And because, and teenagers are naturally predisposed to stay up a bit later at night and that sort of thing as well. But still kind of identifying that it can be a really great thing to start switching off, 45 minutes to an hour before bed, like cut the study, cut the screen time. Again, eye rolls massive at this point in the conversation, but just sort of showing the reasons why we like to do that, because it's firing up your brain and that sort of a thing, which can make it hard to be able to come down.
Sometimes there's this period in life, mental health can become a bit of a forefront for young people. There's a lot of anxiety around certain things that are happening in their life. As Parent Line counsellor and working for Parent Line, I can certainly hear a lot of parents having some anxieties about that. Kim, so can you share something about that and how a parent can go through this?
Definitely. I think Georgia made some really great calls, and I think things that parents can take on board as well. I think that when we start talking about mental health, despite the fact that we all have it and we all navigate this, it can be really scary. It can be really scary for parents to kind of, worry about their children, especially since at that point in their lives, they are looking externally, probably, they're looking to their peers, they're looking to their social kind of contacts a lot more than they are us as parents. And that can just add, when once upon a time they would tell me everything, now they're secrets and they're not telling me. They're also, withdrawing from me, and that can kind of, you know, the combination can make it even more scary as well. I think Georgia made a really good point about normalising emotions in general. And I think that's something that we can take on board and try and do as early as possible as well. It's not the easiest thing to just start doing. So we want to kind of like make it the norm in terms of talking about this in our families, talking about over dinner, and not to be scared of, you know, any negative emotion. The negative emotions are just as important as the good ones for a really good reason, right? And I think that, you know, we kind of look at sadness and we look at things like anger, and we kind of want to put them in a cupboard. We don't want to deal with them as well, but we want to be able to navigate that, and we want to be able to sit with our kids, and we want to be able to, you know, let them see us, but we want to be able to do it in a healthy way as well, like Georgia was saying. So not being scared of, you know, what is perceived as a negative emotion. Kids have the right to be angry about certain things. And when we talk about emotional regulation, it's really about, you know, if they're going down into that negative emotion, we want them to naturally come up, right? Just like, you know, what comes up in a good emotion will come down, and will kind of, you know, that equilibrium will kind of happen again. The same will happen with a lot of the negative emotions as well. They're naturally designed to come back up and to regulate, especially if the things that they are experiencing are legitimate things that are going to make them sad, are legitimate things that they have every right to be angry about as well. And we know that if we're kind of helping our kids deal with these emotions, then they're more likely to come up to equilibrium, because we're helping them with that kind of regulation. And the easiest way to do that is normalising these kind of discussions, and that way it's a natural thing. Like, they're not even kind of questioning it. Well, I know that I can go talk to mum about this, and I know I can talk to dad, and they're going to be able to handle this, as opposed to like freak out and get really, really overwhelmed and anxious about that as well. So how do we normalise it is really the point that we want to kind of talk about.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's really being on the same level, isn't it? You know, as a parent, you really need to be on that equal page as well, because if you're up here and they're up here,
how hard is it?
Nothing's going to achieve in a positive way, is it?
But it's about our kids seeing that in us as well.
Exactly.
Like, if we're going to have moments where we're legitimately angry, and I can talk to you without completely dysregulating and kind of losing my mind about that, because I have the right to be a little bit angry that I asked you to do A, B, C, and D, and you haven't. You know, I have the right to be angry about that.
Or done J.
Exactly. So it's okay for them to see that in us as well. Like, we're allowed to show our kids emotion, and the negative stuff as well.
So acknowledging those emotions is really important, and it's such a developmental stage, isn't it? You know, is from 12. I mean, most kids are transitioning now from primary school at the age of 11, 12. It's massive. It's a massive time frame in their lives, and it's just as important as any other time in their lives. But the growth and development is huge, and that's going to impact the way they see things and the way they behave, and the way their well-being is going to be impacted. So thank you very much for that, Kim. We did speak a little bit about the sleep and routine and things like that. I mean, generally, Alia, how do you see that as, you know, I suppose the cyberbullying consultant, and looking at that social media and devices and things? How do you see that?
Yeah, so I think Georgia touched on some really great points before about really winding down in that sort of like half an hour to 45 minutes before bed. So putting away devices so that we're not being affected by blue light and things like that. But one of the things that I think is really important in this space is to keep in mind that teenagers want to feel a part of it. They want to be involved. And so having their device in their room can be kind of like a stepping stone, I suppose, to just staying up that little bit later to you know, reply to that friend or to watch that next episode on Netflix, which we have all done before. We're all guilty of that.
I'm totally distracted with that ping, ping,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so like thinking about that as a teenager, you really have that FOMO, that fear of missing out, and it makes it a lot harder to put that device down and just go to sleep without wanting to go, oh, if I just check that, maybe my crush has replied to my message or something along those lines, you know. So one of the things that I suggest is that in this space, having the device out of the room at night time. So whether that's right before they're going to sleep or sort of in that half an hour to 45 minutes before they're going to bed, kind of removing that distraction so that they actually have the physical space and that like mental capacity to go to sleep and to wind down for the day. And they know that if that's sort of a thing that's set very early on with like getting their device and getting their sort of you know, their phone or whatever it is, if that sort of boundary is set early on, they know that, okay, I have to finish up my conversations now, like it's time for me to start winding down for bed.
Definitely. Look, and I think that's something that we need to remember as well. Like that is the best thing that we can do for our kids, but that's going to be legitimately hard for the adults to do.
Yes.
Right? Like in a perfect world, we'd have the adults doing the exact same thing. And I get that, you know, as the adults, we get to make our own rules for ourselves, and we get to make some rules for our kids that we don't have to abide by. But at the very least, I think it's really important to at least use that to give you a little bit of empathy for why that might be difficult for your adolescent. You know, we know it's the best thing for it, but we know that we would struggle turning off Netflix when we don't want to watch anymore or whatever we could possibly be doing. And while it might be like, you know, do as I say, not as I do, at least you're going to have a little bit of empathy for why they're going to struggle with it and why you might get a little bit of kickback for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really interesting, and I suppose it's a part of that, almost like the routine, that it can be like the bedtime routine. You might have a very different one when a child is 3, but when they're 13, it's going to look even different. So I suppose we're going into a conversation about how routine and structure can help a young person. We know in the early years, you know, most young people can really respond quite well to routine and structure. How does that look in this time frame of their lives? What do you think, Kim?
I think it's a time where boundaries are pushed. I think they're meant to push boundaries. I think that can be really difficult. It can be super challenging as well, but also incredibly normal. They're going to push you. They're going to want to take a mile when you only want to give them an inch. They are going to negotiate, right?
Is that what you call it, negotiate?
Yeah, negotiate. Definitely. And I think that, like, especially since we've spoken about, you know, just how busy families are. So routines absolutely have a place.
Yes.
Sleep is incredibly important. You know, negotiations are incredibly frustrating, especially if you're exhausted as a parent as well. So yeah, it's a hard time, and we're going to set ourselves up, hopefully, you know, to have those kind of conversations. But every now and again, we're not going to do it so well. You will fight with your adolescent. You absolutely will fight with your adolescent, and you will lose your mind with them on occasion as well. And I think someone said, you know, how do we be kind to ourselves and kind of, you know, even have the conversations about when those conflicts happen. Sometimes it's okay to pull a pin in a conversation if it's escalating to a point and, you know, potentially lose a battle to win a war. Like, that is okay.
Yes.
That's okay to do. And then you can come back in a better space and you can actually have a conversation as to why this got as heated as it did, or why this was such a frustrating kind of experience as well. So I think it's about being kind to yourself and understanding, and kind of, you know, it's you're gonna have some tough times. It's gonna be fun.
So those routines, you know, they are still important for those older years of childhood and adolescence. And I think a part of that is that, I suppose, the diet and the healthy choices, because sometimes that goes down a little bit too, especially as a young person gets a bit older. They have more independence of choosing the meals, what they do, you know, whether it be at school, at tuck shop, or walking home in the afternoon and stopping at KFC every afternoon. You know, when they go into that workspace, a lot of them are working in fast food places and they're getting these free meals and things like that. How do you see that impacting a young person and their development in that stage, Georgia?
I think that's a really great conversation to have, even even in just normalizing and starting to, if it hasn't already been introduced, the importance of diet and exercise and how that impacts our mental health, because there's a direct linkage to it. So again, this can be, I guess, coming from a school perspective, it's something that we lightly touch on. We don't explore too much. It's sort of just planting a couple of seeds, and then letting the students water them and grow and continue those conversations where applicable. But I guess just sort of introducing a bit of understanding around like the mind-gut connection and the importance of healthy gut bacteria and how this impacts our brain and development, and and teenagers are going through such a massive growth period of growth and development. So just sort of giving them a few messages.
Going to eat you out of house at home.
Yeah.
Eat everything.
Yeah, I think a message that we give, particularly around looking at self-care options and regulation strategies, is using exercise as a tool to be able to, boost their mood or to be able to regulate, or if they're experiencing a particularly, rough emotion, sometimes that physical, vigorous activity can help them process that and sort of work that out in a physical space as well. So
that can look different for every young person and parent, and that also provides opportunities for even the parent to have those connective times with their child. So that can be certainly a space there.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to, I suppose, that those routines and the meals and things, families and parents can be quite stressed about putting a decent meal on the table every night. We're under pressures, we work full time, we've got all these different things happening. But then there's sometimes the expectation that we have to have this, wonderful meal put on the table. What do you sort of say to that, Kim, about that expectation versus reality with parents?
I would say I completely understand why that creates the stress it creates, and we'd really kind of want to, let's break this down as well. It makes sense. We do put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do everything right. We compare, we compare. That's how we've kind of been for a really long time. Really kind of looking at the end of the day, picking those battles as well. What is important? Ultimately, what is important? And we'll have kind of it's okay for a parent to throw out the rule books every now and again. If you're sitting there and you're finding that this stress to be a certain way is literally draining your capacity to be present, to be connected, to be, if it's literally kind of affecting your capacity to do those things, then it's not worth it. It's okay to throw out the rule books and, have a picnic on the lounge room floor. Literally. Frozen pizza. Absolutely. 100%. We want to, balance that stuff out. If it is draining our capacity, how do we get it back up? Because if I take a second to try and fill that capacity back up, then I'm going to be better tomorrow. I'm going to be able to do it a little bit better tomorrow than what I obviously can today. And that's completely okay. I think one of the big things as well is just any massive change you're going to have. So if we, suddenly kind of telling, our household that we're going to, eat completely healthy and we're gonna, we're all gonna
GF guys.
Yeah, we're vegan. We're vegan in this household now. You're gonna have some kickback, right? If we make any massive changes within what our families are used to, what our kids are used to, you're going to have consequences to that as well. So how do you make this and just a normal part of your life as well? How do you balance that kind of stuff out from day dot, I think is, at least, do the best we can. And the best we can is good enough. Right?
Exactly. And it is all about balance, isn't it? And mental health and well-being, it's the balance of everyone involved in the family, not just the young person. As parents and carers, they also need to have that balance. So thank you very much for sharing all your information, insights. It's been really helpful, and I really hope